The mystery over the death of Alexander the Great may have finally been solved, and his passing was grislier than historians had ever imagined. The fearsome leader suffered to a rare disease that left him paralyzed for 6 days, gradually robbing him of his ability to move, speak, and breathe, claims a new study. It means the ancient Macedonian ruler was likely still alive while his loyal soldiers prepared his body for burial in 323 BC. His muscles were paralyzed to the point that doctors couldn't see he was still breathing, meaning he was pronounced dead nearly a week early. One of the history's finest warmongers, Alexander the Great, established the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen through a series of ferocious military conquests. At the age of 25, his army overcame overwhelming odds to crush the Persian territories of Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt without suffering a single defeat. The towering leader died suddenly in Babylon at the age of 32, and for decades historians have puzzled over what finished him off, with some blaming alcoholism or even poison. Now health scientists in New Zealand think they have the answer: a rare disease that destroyed his body from the inside. They suggest the condition left him paralyzed and unable to speak, meaning his staff failed to recognize for nearly a week that their king was still alive. I wanted to stimulate new debate and discussion and possibly rewrite the history books by arguing Alexander's real death was 6 days later than the previously accepted, said study author Dr. Catherine Hall of the Dunedin School of Medicine in New Zealand. His death may be the most famous case of pseudothanatos, or false diagnosis of death, ever recorded. Her team pored over ancient accounts of Alexander's symptoms as well as modern medical textbooks for their research. His illness is said to have begun after a crazy night of drinking in which he downed 12 pints of wine. Alexander complained of fatigue and generalized aches the next morning, but chose to power through another dozen pints of wine. A day later, and sharp abdominal pains plagued Alexander, while an increasingly severe fever took hold. Bedridden and in excruciating pain, the great leader gradually lost his ability to move, only able to flicker his eyes and twitch his hands just 8 days after his symptoms began. By the 11th day, the king of Macedonia and Persia was pronounced dead, though staff claimed he remained sound of mind right until the death. Hall says Alexander's symptoms match up with the brain disorder Guillain-Barré syndrome. The disease occurs when the body's immune system attacks its nervous system, gradually paralyzing. It affects 1 in 100,000 in UK and US today. Hall says GBS would explain the fearsome warrior's paralysis, which first took the use of his legs and arms before rendering him unable to speak. The disease, caused by a bacterial infection in the stomach, does not affect the brain, which matches reports that Alexander was sound of mind through his illness. His new diagnosis raises the gruesome possibility that Alexander was still alive long after he was pronounced dead. At the time, doctors didn't use your pulse to check if you were still alive, instead scoring victims for signs they were still breathing. The paralysis would have gradually restricted his respiratory muscles until his breaths were so small that doctors couldn't spot he was alive. Greek scholars later wrote that in the days after his death, Alexander's body didn't decompose, proving the warrior king was a god. But Hall says this may have been because he was in fact still breathing. However, Alexander's breathing was so restricted, he likely was in a coma by the time preparations for his death began. Much about Alexander's incredible life and grim death remains a mystery.